Okay, we are now at the top of the hour. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the time you're taking out of your day to learn more about how to be more proficient in Fuse. As we go through today, just a couple of housekeeping items to address first. All of the cameras and microphones for attendees have been disabled, so no need to worry about being on camera. We've turned that off. We've also turned off the microphones, so you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. So we would encourage you to ask any of your questions using that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So just go ahead and click on that Q&A icon and type in those great questions. My name is Anna DeSico, and I'm a Patterson trainer, and I am very proud to be joined by my colleague and friend Rich McKinney, who will be facilitating this webinar today, and he'll be managing those questions that you type into the Q&A section there. Also located in the chat area, we are going to have and be continually posting a handout to go along with this webinar. As new people join, we'll be adding that in. So please go ahead and feel free to download that. You can print it out if you'd like to follow along. And we do encourage all of you to be an active participant. So please feel free and go ahead and ask those questions. If it turns out we don't have enough time to address them all, we will be sure and send out an email after the fact with all of the answers there that to the questions that you've asked. All right. So as we begin our session today, just keep in mind these master classes are designed to present information to you that incorporates all the wonderful features of the software and is also based on examples that we as software trainers have accumulated from working with countless Fuse offices over the years to really understand what the best use of it is in real life situations. So hopefully we'll be able to give you some great ideas today and some inspiration to take with you as you use Fuse in your own practice. So our topic for today, as you know, is optimizing your accounts receivable. And as part of our agenda, we're going to be diving into the account summary and the transaction history screens. We're going to talk about custom invoices and how to recreate claims. We're going to talk about distribution of payments and how to redistribute those. All the filters that we have in those areas, and along with the encounter, checkout, and cart, we'll do a deep dive on those. We'll also be talking about unapplied credits and, of course, lots more. All right, so without further ado, we will go ahead and get started. And I'm going to pull up my Fuse site here. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to be focusing in on optimizing your accounts receivable today, and we're going to go ahead and start out in our account summary screen. So I'm going to pull up one of my favorite patients here. And when we first search for a patient, as you know, we have the overview as our landing page, and we can access those account areas either from the drop-down in the header, or we can go straight to that account summary by clicking on that view account. So in the account summary screen and also in the transaction history screen, we have our account header here at the top. And our account header gives us a lot of great information about the status of the account, along with some really useful action items that we can do as we're going through our daily accounting tasks. So as you may already know, things that are in blue inside of Fuse are clickable. Those are action items. We also get here at the top in the account summary window the ability to select which family members we are viewing at a time. So if we click that drop down, you can see right now I'm just looking at one patient's information, but we could switch that over to all account members. And don't forget, we're going to need to click that apply button over there. So that's going to change the information that we see displayed here. So again, if I go back and just take a look at one patient, you'll see how the balance updates. So this box here on the left-hand side That's going to display the balance just for the patient that I'm looking at right now. And then you'll see an asterisk there, and that's going to display the balance for all account members altogether. If there's any estimated insurance or any estimated insurance adjustments, those are also going to display there along with the total amount due now from the patient. And underneath each of those boxes displaying that information, I have the appropriate action I can go ahead and take right here. So if we had any amounts coming in on any open claims, I could go ahead and apply that insurance payment right there. Same with the amount that's due from the patient. I can go ahead and apply an account payment right here from the header. We also have kind of a graphic representation here of what's going on with our account balance. We can look at the age represented by the aging categories, but also by color. And you can see this particular account is delinquent. It's over 90 days, which is represented by that red color there. On the boxes on the right-hand side, I have those action items related to my accounting tasks. I can go ahead and apply an adjustment. I can send off an individual statement for this account. I could upload a document. I could add in an account note, or I could transfer somebody from this account to another. So all of those are just right here at the top in our account header. The other thing that we have here on our account summary screen is a list of individual encounters that have been created in the past, and we'll talk more about those in a little bit. One of the things, and when we talk about the differences between the account summary versus the transaction history, one of the differences that we have in this screen here is this ability to add a new encounter. So when we're posting new services to the accounts in Fuse, that's actually called an encounter, and we initiate that process right here. By the way, if you have appointments on your schedule, you can also initiate that process through the appointments, but you can post them directly to the services here. If I look at my schedule, I have 2 appointments on my schedule for today. One has services attached, as you can see the display abbreviation there, and the other doesn't. I can check out both of those appointments from the schedule to initiate that process if that's my preference. Today, though, I'm just going to concentrate and start that process here from within the account. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click that add new encounter button there. And this takes me into what's called the cart. The cart is the first step of our encounter. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and add services. Now, if I had initiated this from the schedule and I was checking out an appointment that had services attached, those would automatically populate here for me. When I start this process from the account summary, I'm starting out with a blank cart or an empty cart, and I'm going to go ahead and add services. So when we add services, we have the option to pull those services in from a variety of places. If the patient has proposed services already, I can pull from that list. If they have treatment plans that have organized those proposed services, I can pull in those treatment plan items. We can also go through the preventive care categories and pull in services that way. And then finally, the new option just refers to our entire list of service codes, and I can pull those codes in here. And that's what I'm going to do here. When we're looking at our entire list of service codes, there's different ways we can make this list shorter. We can search by the code individually, or we can go by the service type. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So in this case, I'm going to select a comprehensive exam and an FMX to post to the account. Just a quick note on these check boxes here. If you're posting more than one service, you want to use these check boxes and then add services. If it was just one individual service that I was adding, I could go ahead and do that as a quick add. Another thing that I've seen a lot of offices do and get frustrated by is this close button here. What you want to be sure to do is click on add services. If we check the boxes and then close, it's not going to actually capture those. So we're going to click add services. Here I have the opportunity, if needed, to change the provider, fee, or date. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and save both of those as is. And now I'm going to close that add services window. So now I have items in my cart. You'll notice that each of the service codes are listed here. Now, if I was posting a really long appointment or a lot of services altogether that was causing that list to be very, very long, one of the things I could do here is actually click on these shortcuts to the code, and that'll take me right to that spot in the list. In this case, with just two of them, it's pretty easy to see everything all at once. As we're looking in this cart area, we have the option, again, to change the service date if we need to. We can also change the provider of the service itself, so the treating provider, or the provider that's going to be designated on the claim form. Now, we can do those individually for each service, or we also have the option to do that right up here for all services. So if this was actually done by a different provider, I could go ahead and change that for both of them at the same time. The other thing that we're seeing here in our cart is a preview of the fees and the charges and any estimated insurance amounts here. And you'll see those are listed for each service individually, and then the totals down here at the bottom. So the location fee is our regular office fee. We may or may not have discounts or taxes, which may lower or increase that location fee. If there is any discounts or taxes, that's going to cause me to have either a higher or lower charge. In this case, the location fee and the charge is the same. If I'm dealing with a patient that has insurance that we're contracted with and there's a fee schedule in play, I'm also going to see a different allowed amount here. So in this case, you can see the allowed amount is lower than the charges, and I know that there is a fee schedule attached to this patient's plan. And it's also letting me know what the difference is between that allowed amount and the total charges, which is $16. That's the amount that will be adjusted off. And then we also have the benefit information here. So the estimated insurance benefit is going to be the same as the allowed amount, which means that my patient has an estimated balance for each of these services of $0. So we get that preview information in the cart. And at this point, we have a couple of options. We could either go ahead and start the checkout and proceed to the next step, or we can actually save this as a pending encounter. If there's a reason that we're not quite sure if all of these services are correct, we have the option to save this and go back to it at a later time. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and just do that start checkout. And this is the second step of our encounter. So this is our checkout screen, and this is where we can manage our payments and adjustments. We can change our distributions, and we can decide which services are going to be billed to insurance or not. The other thing that we have on the right-hand side is our checkout summary. And as we make changes in the checkout screen, this information is going to be updated and show us a real-time balance due. So we're going to play around with this, and you'll see how that balance due amount changes as we make changes here. It also lets me know that the insurance claim will be generated, and it lets me know the carrier and the plan information. So what's nice about Fuse is once we complete this encounter, that insurance claim will be automatically created and batched for us. Okay, so we went ahead and we added two services to the cart. We've got the comprehensive exam and the FMX. Let's say in this situation, the patient wasn't actually eligible for the FMX, but we went ahead and did it anyway as part of our standard of care. But in this case, rather than bill it to the insurance where we know it's going to be denied, the doctors decided to go ahead and extend a courtesy and not charge the patient for that. So if we want to remove one of these services from the claim, you'll notice there's a claim column here, and those services, if they're marked to be submitted to insurance, those will be checked by default. Any of those that we don't want to bill, I'm just going to go ahead and uncheck that box. Now you'll notice that the balance over here in the checkout summary increased because when I decided not to bill that to insurance, Fuse now wants to attribute that that amount, that 150 amount, to the patient. So the balance due updated. Okay, so in this scenario, I'm not going to bill that FMX. And I instead am going to go ahead and do a courtesy adjustment here. So up in the upper left corner, this is where I can attach either a payment or an adjustment to this encounter. In this case, I'm going to do that adjustment. I'm going to put in the amount of the service. And I'm putting in the amount of the total charges because if we're not going to bill this to insurance, there's not going to be that allowed amount difference there. So we're going to credit off that entire amount. And I'm going to choose to put this in as a professional courtesy. And then I'm going to apply that adjustment, and you'll see my balance due has updated again. And now our checkout summary includes that professional courtesy of $150. You'll also notice here in the checkout summary that I do have the option to remove things from this calculation. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. Okay, so at this point, you can see here we've got a due now of 0 for both of these services, one to be paid by the insurance and one that we have just adjusted off. If we did, you'll see here this balance due, even though we don't owe anything on today's services, the balance due is incorporating this prior balance. Now we can either choose to include that in our calculation or we can remove it. If we click on remove, then the balance due goes to 0, which is what we anticipate the patient will owe just for today. But when we talk about managing our accounts receivable, one of the best practices is if somebody owes a balance, if they're there in the office, we want to make every effort to go ahead and collect on that balance while we have them there. It's a lot more efficient to try to do it that way than call after the fact or send multiple statements. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and add that previous balance back into the calculation here. And since I have the patient in the office, I'm going to do my best to collect all or part of that balance. When that prior balance is included in the checkout summary, you'll notice over here, it has the prior account balance due, but I'm not seeing any detail there. What I need to actually do is go ahead and click that arrow to expand this. And now I can see more detail about all of the services that are resulting in that balance, and you can see those here. So that is just kind of a habit to get into. Always make sure that you're viewing those details there. So if I have the patient there in the office and I've discussed that past due balance, maybe she's agreed to go ahead and make a payment on that. So again, while I'm still in this checkout part of the encounter, I can go ahead and add a payment. And let's say she's going to agree to pay $500 today on that past balance. And we can pay with a Visa here, and we'll go ahead and apply that payment. And you'll see again, my balance due amount has updated. That Visa payment's been added into my checkout summary. And again, if I needed to remove that, maybe she decided to pay $600, we could just remove that and do it again. All right. When we are posting a payment on a past due balance, we don't have anything due for today, but we do have the ability right here to distribute that money exactly where we want it to go. So because we're seeing those details, you'll notice of that $500, we have a portion of it being paid to another patient. $50 was automatically distributed there. And we have $30 to a past filling, and we have the $420 for a crown. We can decide right here if we want to make changes. If I instead want to apply all of it for Angela to that crown, all I have to do is zero out the filling, add that into the crown, and now I have determined where I want that money to go. When we're putting in these amounts, just keep in mind, you can only put an amount up to what the amount due now is. So for example, I would not be able to apply $50 to this filling because the patient only owed 30 on it, and it'll give you that warning there. Okay. Once I make a change, if I alter how Fuse has split that payment up, there is a button here I do need to click on to save that distribution before I move on. All right. So again, if I needed to make any changes, I do have those removal options. I do have the option here at the bottom to finish the checkout or to go back to the cart. If it turns out that I needed to add in a service or make a change to the provider, at this point, I can't do that here in the checkout. I would have to back up one step and go back into the cart to do that. Just keep in mind, if I have gone ahead and attached any adjustments or payments at this point, if I do go back to the cart, I am going to lose all of that information, and then I'll have to redo it once I continue the checkout. So just be aware of that. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and finish that checkout. And you do have the option to print out an invoice at this point. I'm just going to continue without doing that. Now, I mentioned that you can go back to the cart from that checkout screen. If you cancel all the way back out, if you go from the checkout back to the cart and then cancel at that point, what's going to happen is it's going to create what's called a pending encounter. Now, in this case, I did not do that. However, I do want to show you what that's going to look like if that happens. And this may happen accidentally, or it may happen on purpose. When you have a pending encounter, you're going to see it in your account summary screen, and it's going to show up right here. It'll be in red, pending, and these are services that did not make it all the way to the account. And that may have happened intentionally, or it may have just happened accidentally. In either case, we have the option here to edit or to delete the encounter, or we can just continue that process to check it out. So this is what that's going to look like here. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm going to go back to my account summary screen for Angela. And now what I have here at the top of my list of encounters is the one that I just completed today. Another thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to doing that checkout screen is there may already be some credits on the account that we can apply during that checkout process. And another kind of best practice when it comes to managing our accounts receivable and trying to be as proactive as possible to keep those amounts in check is a lot of offices will employ prepayment strategies. So rather than waiting to collect at the time or after the fact, if you can get as many of those payments in before the treatment is done, all the better. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So from our account summary, we can go ahead and add a payment from the patient. And if Angela needs to have work done and we want to try to get some of that payment up front, we're going to come in here, we're going to post an account payment. We can see just Angela's information. And let's say we're going to do a $500 prepayment for a crown that needs to be done in the future. So we're going to put in the amount of the payment. We're going to choose the payment type. We'll say this is on American Express. And then we also have a note field. And while it's not a required field, it is really, really important for being able to trace back information after the fact. The more descriptive we can be here in our account where we have the option to put a note, it's just really a great idea. So if I'm doing a prepayment, I'm actually going to do that as the note. Prepayment for Angela for crown number 30, and I can even add my initials. Some offices will like that protocol of having the staff initials on there. Here, when it comes to posting this payment, because I already have some completed services that have not been fully paid yet, Fuse wants to go ahead and take that $500 and distribute it among those past services, but that's not what we're doing here. I'm doing this as a prepayment. So if that's the case, I'm going to change this. Instead of oldest balance, I'm going to switch that to manually. And that zeroes out all of that distribution. And down here at the bottom, it's letting me know that I'm about to save this as an unapplied amount. So this $500 will be unapplied for the time being. And then I have the option to assign it to a provider or not. Now, depending on your practice size, you might have multiple dentists treating your patients, and the patients may not know ahead of time or care which dentist they're going to see for this crown. If that's the case, we can just leave that as unassigned. But if you're a practice that just has one dentist, you can go ahead and assign that amount to the doctor right here. In this case, I'll just leave it as unassigned. You have the option to print a receipt for this payment if you want to. I'm just going to go ahead and apply that. And it's letting me know right here that this is going to result in an unapplied amount of $500, which is unassigned to any provider. That's exactly what I want to do in this case, so I'm going to click OK. So now I've got that $500 unapplied amount, and you'll notice it changed. My account summary window changed. Right now I'm seeing that $500 unapplied. And so it's letting me know. There's also a red question mark here. If I click on that, I do have the option to apply it now. But again, this was a prepayment. I don't want it going to past services. So that's not what I'm going to do in this case. But on some of your accounts where you have unapplied amounts that are not prepayments, that might be a good idea to go ahead and apply those to past services. So now I've got my prepayment. Maybe some time's gone by the next day or later that same day. The patients come in, they're going to have that crown done. Again, I'm going to do another new encounter here. Probably in that situation, I would want to pull from either proposed or treatment plan, but for this example, I'm just going to add it in from new. So here's my crown. Again, it's a single service. I'm just going to do a quick add. I'm going to put in crown number 30. That's what we intended to do, and I'm going to save that. Okay, assuming my dates and providers are all correct, I'm just going to go ahead and start that checkout. So now this is different from the first one that we did, because now we have credits that are showing up here that we can use in the checkout screen. So we have our $500 payment that was posted today. It's letting us know, it's going to show us if there happen to be multiple unapplied amounts, they're going to show the 5 oldest here as options. So in this case, I just have the one, and it even tells me right here. So if I had multiple unapplied credits available to use, because I took the time to add that note when I posted the payment, there's no doubt which one I want to choose. We're doing crown number 30. This is the prepayment for number 30. That's the one I'm going to use. So as soon as I click that button, it's going to update my checkout summary. So I've got the unapplied amount of $500 along with the insurance adjustments that are being factored in for me automatically. Because I've attributed it to this encounter, it's putting that towards the crown that I'm doing today. All right, but you can see I still have this other balance. I'm going to choose to remove the prior account balance because I did already receive a $500 payment towards that. But you see that $500 prepayment didn't quite take care of my entire copay. So at this point, before I finish that checkout, I'm going to collect the rest of that copayment amount. We don't want this patient's debt to increase, so we want to get that remaining copay paid. So here, it's already selected on payment for me, and I'm going to go ahead and collect that $102.50. And let's say this was a check. And I'm going to apply that to the checkout summary as well. So now I have my prepayment of $500, the remaining balance or copayment with my check, and now my balance due for today is 0. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and finish that checkout. And you could post or print out a receipt, but I'm not going to do that here. All right. So now I have 2 encounters for today. In real life, this crown would have happened at a later date, so the dates would be different. But that leads me down to our next area of the account summary, which is the list of encounters. So one of the really nice things about Fuse in this account summary screen, for any accounts like this one where I have a balance due from the patient, And if I've been trying to collect on that, it's very likely that I will have had questions. Why do I owe this? What is this balance coming from? The way that the account summary screen is organized in Fuse makes it really, really easy to do that research very quickly and answer those questions from the patient. So as you can see here, the list of encounters starts with the most recent and goes on down older and older is that at the bottom of that list. Now, without even looking at more detail here, you'll notice that one of the column headers is balance. So if I'm looking to see, well, gosh, why does this patient owe this balance? I can look down here through these past encounters and I can go, oh, well, here's a big chunk of it right here. So from this date of service, of October 6th of 21, that's where a big chunk of this balance is coming from. And if I want to find even more information on that, if I click my little arrow here, it's going to expand that encounter and I see all the details within it. So the encounters in this account summary screen are all of the activity that has been entered into the account related to that original date of service. So here is the original date of service. And then within that encounter grouped all together, I have all of the activity that's taken place since then. So that is just a really nice organized way to view this information. I can see the original services from back in 2021. There was a payment that was posted at the same time. There's my account notes that get automatically created as the insurance claims are created and sent and closed. And then any subsequent payments as well. There was one from a year later, and then some additional ones. So I can see all of the activity right here. So if I have the patient on the phone or in the office, I have really readily available information to share with them to help explain what's going on with their account. Part of how we answer those questions and the accuracy of the information here is going to depend, of course, on distributing those payments to the correct services. So that is just a crucial step in being able to share this information and speak with confidence about where the balance is coming from. We'd want to pay careful attention when we're posting those payments that we're distributing them to the correct services so that they get linked together in these encounters. So just want to mention that. The other thing you'll notice as we expand this encounter, we have a breakdown of that balance that we're seeing, if any of it is expected from the insurance. In this case, no, the insurance has already paid what they're going to, so that entire amount for this encounter is due from the patient. I have these action items, so I can go ahead and post a payment directly to this encounter. So for example, if I click that add a payment, the only options to distribute that payment are to those services on that encounter. If I do that, apply a payment from up here in the header, I have more dates of service available that I could post the payment to. So this is just a more specific way to apply that payment directly to the services. I could do the same thing with an adjustment. I could view the original invoice with the account information as it was at the time that these were posted, or I could print a new invoice. And then I can also recreate this claim. So we have claim activity in the notes here, but if I wanted to rebill that for both of those services, I can go ahead and do that here. We'll also talk about in a little bit how I can do a more customized claim in the transaction history window, but here I can recreate the claim for the two services on this encounter. The other thing that I have available when I expand this is I have edit and I have delete options. I also have viewing options here for each of the transactions that are within this encounter. So here I have a payment. I have the option to edit or delete. There are certain things I can change, but I can't do things like change the amount. I could change the date and the payment type. If the amount was incorrect, that would have to be deleted and then reposted. You'll also notice that the more recent payments, I have those options, but if I look down here towards the bottom, there's the original co-payment of $500, those edit and delete options are grayed out, and that's because this payment was included on a deposit, which is another thing that we're going to be talking about today. So I don't have the ability to change those payments once they've been deposited, and that's actually a good thing, and we'll talk more about that later. Okay, so I have the edit and delete. I also have the option here to view. So this little eyeball is giving me some viewing options. Now, it says plan name, but if I click on the plan name, that's actually going to show me a copy of the insurance claim form, which is another thing I love about Fuse. I love to see the actual form that the insurance received. And that opens up in another tab for us, which I can close out of the way. The other thing, though, that I have is a shortcut to go look at the claim notes for that claim. So I can click on that little notepad here, and I'll see the automatic ones that are created by Fuse. But hopefully, when you're doing your insurance, you're taking the time to make notes about denials and just anything that is associated as you're following up with those claims. You can add those notes in here. Now, any of those I can edit or delete. I'll just go ahead and delete that one out. So that's another really nice thing as far as tracking information after the fact. If some of this balance was because a service was denied by the insurance, I can view that claim note right here from within the encounter. Speaking of insurance, our next Fuse Masterclass is going to be in October, and it's going to be all about insurance. So I highly, highly recommend that you all register for that one as well. Okay. So we did, let me go ahead and collapse this. So what we did for this patient is we entered an unapplied amount as a prepayment. But I also mentioned that you might have some unapplied amounts already in your accounts that weren't really intended as a prepayment, but they're sitting there, and we probably want to clean those up. So I'm going to switch patients here. So here for this patient, you can see again, I have an unapplied amount, and that's sitting right at the top of my list of encounters. And as I can see on this account, there's actually a credit balance. So credits are listed in parentheses. So the overall account balance is a credit. There's nothing else anticipated from insurance. So the total amount due now is the credit of $75. So as I look down here in the encounters, I can see, even though the total is 85, I actually have two unapplied amounts. And you can tell because they've got the question mark. And so there's two separate unapplied amounts. There's nothing more coming in on the account. So the best thing to do right now is, first of all, we can refund the patient. So we'll do that. And then we can also connect this unapplied amount to any services that might be sitting out there not fully paid. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do next. So I'm going to first issue a refund, and that's going to be done using this adjustment task here. And a refund is going to be a positive adjustment. It's going to be a patient refund. Now we can assign this refund to a particular provider. I happen to already know that the unapplied amount is unassigned. You can see right here in the list, it's telling me that it's an unassigned, unapplied amount. So if the original payment is unassigned, I'm going to go ahead and also leave the refund unassigned just to match those up. I also, again, have a note box here. And again, every opportunity that you have to create an account note, please use that. It's just going to make your lives easier and those of your team members when you're looking for information later. So I'm going to say that we are refunding. And down below, I can still see it. It's recent enough I don't have to scroll. I'm going to refund $75 payment from, this was 9/28/22. And again, I'll just add my initials. And I'm going to go ahead. You could print a receipt, but I won't. I'm going to apply that. Whoops. You know what would help if I put in the $75. But thank you, Fuse, for letting me know I missed something. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and apply that refund. So now my account balance is zero. Due now is zero. Great, but I also have kind of this messy accounting situation, and I like to clean things up, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and click that question mark next to the unapplied amount, and it's letting me know there's two of them. So I've got a 75 and a 10. I'm going to apply that now, and it's going to take me through one at a time. So here, the first thing it lets me know is there are services and patient refund. So that's exactly how I'm going to apply that. I'm going to put $10 towards the MI pace that was never paid. And then I'm going to go ahead to the next transaction. And now I'm going to put the refund, or excuse me, I'm going to put the rest of that $75 unapplied amount towards that patient refund that I just entered. And I'm going to apply that too. So my unapplied amount is no longer there. Everything is connected exactly as it should. So if, a year from now I ever have any questions, now this account is very tidy and it'll be very easy to answer any questions as more balance accumulates. All right. So that is our account summary window. I'm going to go back over to Angela here. Rich, any questions that have come up since then, since we started? Okay. Any questions that you have, please feel free again to go ahead and add those to the Q&A. Rich will be answering those as we go through. So that's our account summary view of the account. And as we know, there's another way we can look at this information, which is in the transaction history. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the transaction history view next, and we'll talk about this window. So again, I have my account header running here across the top. So everything within these boxes is identical to the account summary. There is a difference with regard to the filters that I have to play with here. So I can filter by account members, both in the transaction and in the account summary. But now I have some additional ways to filter this information. So the transaction history view is kind of a more traditional ledger style layout. So as I scroll down, it just lists chronologically all of the transactions for this account with the most current at the top here. So so as we're looking for things, it might be kind of hard to find them. They're not organized the same as in the account summary by date of service, but there are some really fantastic ways I can filter and sort this list to find exactly what it is that I'm looking for. So we'll go through some of those options. Again, I could I could filter by certain account members, either one or two or all at the same time. Again, any filter changes I make, don't forget to click that apply button over there. Once I've made changes to the filters, and if I want to go back to the default, I do have that reset button. The other thing that we can do here in the transaction history is we can actually pull in different locations. As you can see, we trainers operate in a very huge practice. We have 37 locations. But if your practice has more than one location and your patients are being seen in more than one, you can utilize the location filters here as well. We also have a date range filter. So if we wanted to see all the activity from just say 1 year, whoops, and then we apply that date range filter, Now what we're going to see is all of the activity for the family, because I'm looking at all members all together within the year 2021. So that limits the information that I need to look through. At this point, we also have print and export options here as well, so we could utilize those if needed. We also have, in addition to the location and date range, we also have a whole other set of filters that we can implement if we need to. I'm going to reset my filter for a second, go back to the default. Yeah, just for my patient. Okay, so as I'm scrolling through my transactions, I see a lot of account notes in here. And if I'm looking for really specific information, sometimes those account notes can be getting in the way. So one of the things that I like to do sometimes, especially if I'm having to research an account, is come into the more filters options. And that opens up some other things that we can filter in or out. And one of those filters is for transaction types. So if I'm looking for just financial information, services, adjustments, payments, I can choose to remove, for example, those account notes. And then if I click on apply, it takes all of those out of view just temporarily. But now I'm left with, okay, just the nitty gritty of the financial information of what's going on with that account. And that makes it easier to find what I'm looking for. Also, what we have here is the ability to filter by tooth number. So we might have situations where we need to know if we're planning to do a crown or a filling, and we think we might have done that already in the past. We want to check the history on a tooth. We can do that from other areas of Fuse in the clinical areas, but we can also do it right here from the account. So if we want to look, for example, and say, okay, I want to see everything related to tooth number 2, or I just want to see if there's anything for tooth number 2, I can employ that filter here, and that gets everything out of my way except for that history on that tooth. So that's another really nice way to use those filters here. I'm going to go ahead and reset that back. The other thing that we have, it's not at all a Fuse feature, but it is a Windows feature, and it's our Control F. Control F for find lets us search our entire browser screen here for words, numbers, any information that we type in the search field here. We'll then see any place it shows up in Fuse. So we can advance from one to the other, and you'll see if I am looking for the word crown, it found 3 places on my screen where that shows up. So again, depending on what I'm looking for, I can also utilize that Control F to find things. So not a Fuse, we can't take credit for it. It's not a Fuse feature, but it is there, and you can use it not only in Fuse, but throughout Windows. The other way that we can look at this information in our transaction history is by sorting. So we can implement those filters like we just did, but also in the list itself, we can change the order that this information shows in by sorting. So the ones that are in blue here, those are column headers that can actually be sorted. So again, if we were looking for specific tooth information, we could search, we could filter. We can also sort just by clicking on the column header here. So first click is going to put it from, first of all, any entry without a tooth number, and then starting with lowest to highest number. And if we click that sort again, it reverses the order. So now we're going from highest number to lowest to no tooth number at all. So it groups all of the transactions together by tooth number, if that's what we're looking for. So here's number 30, number 3, number 2. The other thing we can sort by that might come in handy is the transaction type. So if we click that once, it's going to put it alphabetically for us. And if I take out my account notes, if that doesn't interest me, now what I have here is an alphabetical list by transaction type, starting with my account payments, then my insurance payments, adjustments, etc. So here, if I want to see all of my transactions grouped together, I want to see all my account payments, here I go. All right. If we've made changes to the sort in our list of transactions, there's a reset sort that'll take us back to the default, which is just chronological by date with the most current at the top. So different ways we can manipulate that information to make it really easy to find what we're looking for. The other two functions that we have in the transaction history that we don't have in the account summary is the ability to do a very customized claim and also a custom invoice. So I'm going to start with the create claim, and I'm going to reset all my filters and everything. So if I click on the create claim, that's going to open up all of the services that are available to be billed to insurance. Now, in the account summary, the create claim option within that encounter, that's just for the services on that encounter. If I wanted to be more specific, maybe just one individual service from a certain date of service or from multiple dates of service. Maybe my patient has updated their insurance and we found out late, and all of a sudden we have to go back and rebill to the new insurance months worth of services. So we can combine all of those on one claim form, or we can just pick and choose to rebill one service from a date of service. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose a couple of these from let's say 2022. Maybe that's where the insurance change happened. So I'm going to do both of those services from within that year. If the patient has dual coverage, you'll have both of those options in the drop-down. This patient just has primary insurance, so there's no need to choose that, but you could bill that to the other plan if you needed to. And then we're going to click on Complete Create Claim to finish that process. Now, this is an important selection that we're going to make here. Because I am choosing to send services that were performed on a previous year, it's giving me the option. Do I want to estimate the benefits for those services based off of my current benefits or not estimate them at all? And that choice is yours. I'm going to say in this case, I'm going to not estimate at all, and then we'll save. So at this point, that claim has been automatically created and batched for us. It's waiting in our claims and predeterminations window for us to go submit it. And you can see those two services are no longer an option to create a new claim because we just did them. So at this point, we could do more services if we need to, or if we're done, we're just going to go ahead and click on cancel. Okay, the other option that we have in our transaction history is our custom invoice. So again, that gives us a lot of freedom to be able to present information to the patient, just either exactly what they're requesting or what we want to include on there. So once we click on that button, you'll notice we have all of our options. Now on an invoice, we can only put a payment or a service or an adjustment on there. So those are the only transaction types you'll see. And I could do any of these from any date. Maybe the patient has just requested to know all the payments they've made in the past, whatever time frame. So I can just go through here and select the account payments. And it's nice that they're in a different color, so I can just easily pick those out of the list here. And And if that's all the patient is requesting, I'm just going to go ahead and create that invoice. And at this point, I can do even more customization with what prints out on that invoice. So I can include the other balance or not. I can have future appointments or not. I can include or exclude any insurance estimations. And I can also do a custom note. So once I click on continue there, in another tab, so I don't get interrupted, I have the print preview of what that invoice is going to look like with just the information I selected, along with my custom note and then my default note. So your default notes, if you don't already have them set up, those can be set up in your practice settings, and those will print out automatically for you. Okay, I'm just going to close that print preview tab. And I'm back in my transaction history. Next thing that I will talk about are these ellipses, which are these blue dots. So these 3 blue dots, that's called an ellipsis. So within that, if I click, I have some more action items. And the options that show up here are going to depend on the transaction type. So if I'm looking at an account note, for example, I have just a couple of options. If I click on the ellipsis next to a payment, I have more options here. And same with services. So I'm going to focus on a couple here. I'm going to go into a payment. Let me get rid of my, I do this a lot. I do remove my account notes a lot. Makes it so much easier to find what I'm looking for. And this is what I'm looking for. Okay, so if I choose an account payment, one of the things we talked about distribution and how really, really important that is to know exactly where your balances are coming from, to know which services have been paid off fully or not yet, or not at all. Distribution is just such a key part of that process. And sometimes things will happen and we might need to make corrections after the fact. In that case, what we're going to do is we're going to access that option from within this ellipsis. So if I have this $100 payment and it wasn't, when it was originally posted, it wasn't going to the correct service, I do have the option to change that distribution. That's one of my options here. So if I click on that change distribution, these are all of the unpaid services for this patient. This is my original payment amount, and you can see the entire $100 was attributed to this crown on number 2. But if that was done in error, it's very easy for me to change that. Instead of going towards tooth number 2, if this really should have been a payment towards the work on tooth number 3, I can just zero out that $100 and I can reapply it to either of these services for number 3. And I like to pay off what I can first. So I'm gonna see here that the patient balance for the filling is $30. I'm gonna put my first $30 of that $100 payment towards that filling, so it's paid off. I don't have to see that filling again. Now the remainder of it, $70, I'm gonna put towards the crown. So I'm not yet done paying off that crown, but I will now have paid off that filling. So we can change that. So if the patient had made a complaint like, well, I paid that $100, I thought I paid, for that filling a long time ago. Now we can correct that so our information in our account is correct. And once we have made those changes to the distribution, we're going to just go ahead and apply it. So changing the distribution after the fact, it doesn't mess with your balances. It doesn't change the amount due. It only changes the amount due for specific services. Okay, so we also have the option within our